welcome. My name is Sharon Tapper. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Really glad that you're here. Let me just give you a quick skinny on who the heck we are in case you aren't already familiar with us. We're the Music Managers Forum US. We were founded in 1993 and we're the leading trade association for artist managers and self-managed artists in the US. We are a registered 501c6 non-for-profit, and our work is powered by the support of our members and the generosity of our sponsors, of which Sound Royalties has been a long-time supporter, certainly as long as I've been part of this organization. They have supported our work, and for that, we're truly grateful and excited for them to be here to talk about this important subject. If you're not already a member of the MMF, we'd love you to join us. Just head over to our website, which is MMF-US.com, and click on the application button. The heart of what we do is committed to education, networking, and advocacy. So through webinars like today's, we provide ongoing professional development to support our community. Our advocacy efforts help shape or provide a collective voice to shape a fairer and more transparent industry. We also foster connection, both virtually and in person, through webinars, community meetups, and our all-day summits. We have a network of 8 chapters: LA, New York, Nashville, Miami, Chicago, Austin, Boston, Atlanta, and we're about to add a 9th chapter in Philadelphia. So we're always evolving and growing. They host local chapter events, foster peer-to-peer networking, provide community-driven support and professional development, and for the managers and artists in their respective locations. So hopefully you've been to one of our events and be able to meet us in person as well. We're also a proud member of the International Music Managers Forum, which is a global network representing management or manager organizations in more than 60 countries. So that spans Europe, Latin America, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Australia. And that connects us with artist managers and music industry opportunities around the world. If you want to stay informed of what we're doing and what we're announcing, we have bi-weekly newsletters. You can easily sign up for them at our website. And also you can follow us on social media at MMF-US. We're delighted to welcome both Alex Heike and Jake DeVries. Alex Heike is the founder and CEO of Sound Royalties, leading royalty finance firm and a pioneer in providing funding solutions to music creatives without taking ownership of copyrights. With decades of experience working alongside Grammy Award winners, platinum artists, and top industry executives across genres, Alex has built a reputation for discretion, innovation, and artist-centered financing. He's a respected thought leader who's spoken at organizations including the Recording Academy, South by Southwest, the American Bar Association, and his insights have been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Billboard, and Rolling Stone. Alongside him today, Jake DeVries is a partner at Citrin Cooperman in the Music and Entertainment Valuation Services Group, where he leads the firm's music valuations practice. With more than a decade of experience as an economist in the industry, Jake specializes in financial modeling, performance income forecasting, and complex music asset valuations. In 2024 alone, he led over 550 valuations, totaling more than $10.5 billion, working with major funds, publishers, record companies, private equity firms, and creators across the marketplace. A frequent speaker and industry commentator, Jake brings deep insight into how music assets are analyzed, structured, and valued in today's evolving rights landscape. We're delighted to have them both with us today to break down the impact of bundling on the value of your catalogs and what you can do to protect it. Alex and Jake, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate the introduction, and it's great to be here with everyone today. I know that the team at Sound Royalties loves working with the MMF and all the stuff that you guys do and collaborating with you. Um,
Thank you.
let's talk about bundling. So, over the past year, the word bundling has started showing up more and more in conversations, across the music industry. Managers are hearing about it, publishers are modeling it, and buyers are definitely underwriting it. At the same time, there's a lot of confusion about what bundling actually means in practice and how material the impact may ultimately be. So, what Jake and I wanted to do today is walk through this in terms of practical terms. We'll break down what bundling is, how it came about, where is it starting to show up economically, and most importantly, what it may mean for catalog strategy and capital decisions going forward. So with that, let's start at the foundation. Jake, maybe the best place for us to begin is simply by defining the term bundling. You want me to take a stab at that?
No, I mean, happy to
Good.
speak to how we think about bundling and bundling broadly, and then more specifically within
Mm-hmm.
music consumption. I do think it's really helpful for this topic because it gets a little hairy to start with some of the basics. So bundling broadly defined is really any sort of service offering that the primary offering might be something like music consumption or access to video on demand. But alongside that primary offering, there are these secondary offerings that come with it. So just to use some examples, let's say you want to subscribe to ESPN. Alongside that might come the option for Disney Plus at a reduced fee, let's say. So that would be an example of a bundle. In the music space, an example of a bundle might be something like the Apple One service, which is Apple Music plus Apple TV plus news plus gaming. So broadly defined, it's really um, some sort of offering that has multiple components to it, if you will.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, so where it becomes important for the music industry and our side of the business is how that revenue, once it's bundled into a subscription, gets allocated back to music. What we've seen so far in terms of the impact, it shows up differently based on the platform. With Spotify, the primary effect was on the mechanical side because certain premium subscriptions were reclassified as bundled offerings, which changes how the mechanical royalty pool was calculated. And with Amazon, I guess some of the industry concern has focused more broadly on how revenue allocation and tier structure could influence performance income dynamics. So the pressure points are different, and not perfectly identical across the different services. So for our conversation today, and when we talk about the industry bundling, it's less about what the consumer sees, it's about how that revenue gets divided behind the scenes and how it impacts our creators. So let's talk about how we got here. To understand how we got here, it helps to look at how audiobooks and bundling evolved over the past couple of years. So originally, Spotify's core premium product was music and podcasts. Audiobooks were available on the platform, but they were primarily monetized, I guess you'd say, a la carte, on an a la carte basis, meaning you could purchase individual titles separately. So at that stage, audiobooks were not structurally embedded into the premium music subscriptions. In late 23, Spotify began rolling out meaningful product change, first in the US and then into other markets around the world. The company introduced basically a set number of audiobook listening hours, included with the premium individual subscription. So from a consumer standpoint, they looked at it and said, "Oh, they're giving me more value for my subscription." But the key inflection point came in March of 24. Spotify reclassified many premium individual plans as bundled offerings. And that included both music and audiobooks under the current mechanical framework. And that triggered concerns across the industry because it had an impact. Amazon, we can talk about. It's a broader conversation, but the key takeaway is that what began as product evolution around audiobooks has become broader royalty allocation story that the market is now actively seeing its impact and underwriting for it when we look at the value of catalogs. Jake, anything you would add to the timeline or anything you think a manager should be particularly be paying attention to at this stage?
No, that's well stated in terms of timeline. Again, Spotify, um, with their categorization of their users into the bundled bucket in March 24, Amazon in their introduction of bundling in late 2024. We're now in February 26, so um, the impact of bundling has been felt in royalty terms for quite some time now. Um, so this is, in that sense, very much it's something that's being felt. This isn't an issue, let's say, that's outstanding. It's a current issue.
It's an issue that Spotify uh, we saw as introducing the conversation through their March 24 reclassification. But the broader concern for the music community is that this type of framework could expand across the streaming ecosystem. Amazon is part of the conversation. While Amazon didn't have a same single reclassification moment as Spotify, the NMPA and others have raised questions about how revenue is allocated within Amazon's multi-tier and prime ecosystem and whether those structures could put pressure on songwriter or publishing economics over time. So what's important to understand is that the DSPs, if you look at it from this perspective, they're highly incentivized to increase the perceived subscriber value while managing and reducing content costs. And bundling is one of the tools that can shift the economics of how music is valued in the subscription. If you're paying $10 a month for a music subscription and all of a sudden they introduce a book subscription to you at no cost, and then they say, well, it has the same value as music. So now 50% of that $10 goes to music and 50% of that $10 goes to the audiobooks, which you didn't even ask for or didn't allocate and we're spending $10 on. It impacts the bottom line dollar for our creators and the value of the catalog. So the concern is straightforward. When subscription structures evolve in ways that reduce the effective allocation to music, that has real downstream implications for our creators and ultimately the catalog valuations. So the mechanics may differ by platform, and we're watching closely to ensure that the music is not being diluted inside broader bundled offerings. Jake, from your side of the market, are buyers still viewing this primarily as a Spotify specific issue, or are they starting to think about bundling more broadly across the ecosystem?
It remains, I would say, primarily a Spotify specific issue, and the focus has remained on Spotify. Really, the reason for that is because they are the largest DSP operating in the U.S. Their market share is estimated in the U.S. at around 39-40%. And so with that level of market share, with the importance of the royalties that come through from that DSP, it does get an outsized share of attention.
Oh, without a doubt. What we're seeing right now, and I want to be clear, it's not a collapse in music revenues, but we're seeing measurable pressure points begin to emerge, particularly on the publishing side. So the most widely cited industry estimate comes from the NMPA, which projected that if the current bundling treatment that's going on right now persists, music publishers and songwriters could see more than $3.1 billion in lost revenue by the year 2032. From the valuation side, Jake, are you already seeing buyers widen their sensitivity ranges around this? Is bundling showing up, if at all, in real underwriting conversations?
Yeah, so this is very much an issue that comes up on a regular basis. So again, the impact, um, is really being felt in royalty terms when folks receive their distributions on a quarterly or semi-annual basis from their publisher representations. Um, the challenge becomes, in part, what expectations, not to get ahead of ourselves, let's say, but we know that the the rates are set for 5-year periods. Um, and so when folks are seeing these royalties coming through via the impact of bundling, the question kind of instantly turns to, well, what sort of timeline can I expect my royalties to remain suppressed? Might they return to pre-bundling levels? When would that happen? So I know I'm kind of I
Yeah,
don't mean
you're jumping up to the
I don't mean
CRB.
to I don't mean to jump ahead, but that's when this comes up, and it does come up all the time. Everybody starts thinking about the future instantly.
We're-
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we'll jump to the future in the future in just a few minutes. But we're talking about bundling and audiobooks and Spotify, but it's not showing up. And this is just part of the story. And that's what I hope we can impress on everyone.
Yeah.
What we're seeing across the market is a range of structures that all have the potential effect on how music is valued within a subscription. The most visible one is audiobooks, which has brought the issue to the forefront with Spotify, but that's only one version. We're also seeing a broader multi-format offerings that combine music with podcasts or spoken word content. Some services operate within a larger ecosystem, such as membership programs, Prime, for example, alongside with free shipping and video and other digital benefits. There's family tier plans and multi-tier subscription structures that create complexity, particularly around different tiers,
Yep.
that can affect the allocation of the dollars for that plan that goes to music. So from the music industry's perspective, the concern isn't just about specific product configuration. The concern is whether these evolving bundle structures reduce the effective revenue attributed to music over time. Jake, are you actively in conversation at times about these different types of bundles, or is it really just one broad risk bucket as you price for it?
No, we are in conversations around the different forms that bundling has taken, and maybe this is a nice opportunity to um, for me to kind of speak to how mechanically um, the royalties that are paid out are impacted by bundling. So we have to remember that when a song is streamed, it's really triggering two payments: a mechanical royalty payment and a performance royalty payment. Um, Even though there are those two payments, both are governed broadly by the phono records proceedings. Uh, those are the 5-year terms that are um, negotiated between the National Music Publisher Association and the digital service providers, the DSPs. So these proceedings, they set the rate structure for these 5-year periods. Now, if we start with the total royalty bucket, I think it's simplest to just think in percentage of revenue terms for the time being. It's a complex formula, greater of, lesser of. But for the time being, if we just focus on the percentage of revenue, I think that makes the issue a little clearer. I think the number that folks are probably most familiar with is the 15.1% figure. So that refers to the share of revenue that gets paid by the DSPs for the use of music, the use of the mechanical and the performance right. So let's stick with 15.1% for a second. So the issue that bundling introduces is right at that level of the conversation, 15.1% of revenue. Well, how is revenue defined? What is considered, what percentage of revenue can be attributed to music, can and should be attributed to music when a bundle is introduced? That is really, it's really the licensable revenue that is, moving the needle in terms of what gets paid out. So let's stick with the Spotify. The Spotify bundling is our example. when audiobooks were introduced, that standalone offering was priced monthly at $9.99, and the premium offering was $10.99. So the way that the math works for a bundle is you look at the price of the standalone offerings, $9.99 and $10.99. You sum the two together and you say the value to the consumer is the sum of the standalone parts. So in this case, that would be 21. And then, so that's your denominator. And then your numerator is the music allocable portion. So it's the 10.99 over the total, right? And so when you do that math, all of a sudden overnight, um, when all of these existing premium subscriptions had this audiobook component added to them, what happened via the regulations was that only 52% of that revenue at that point in time was determined to be allocable to music. So as opposed to 15.1 of 100, it's now 15.1 of 52%. So that is the big reduction that took place in downstream royalties from Spotify. But I'm a fan of, I like to try to provide more straightforward ways of thinking about the direct
Yeah.
impact that was felt by rights holders or songwriters, publishers, etc. Because where the complexity is introduced is Spotify. They're paying royalties not just for the use of music on their premium plans. They're paying for their ad supported plans. They're paying for their Hulu bundle plans or their Tesla bundle plans, whatever other bundles there might be, family plans, etc. Right? So Spotify, they have all of these service offerings, and bundles were introduced via premium, family, etc. But at the end of the day, what we saw internally when we looked across the variety of plans offered by Spotify, and on the whole, what sort of reduction in royalties did we see month to month when bundling was introduced? That was something like a 35% reduction in royalties across all Spotify offerings. So that was the direct felt impact of bundling month to month when that was introduced. So that does vary quite a bit. How bundling was felt from Spotify does vary quite a bit from how it's been felt elsewhere. And so, Alex, that's where things start to get a little more complicated, because I know that I just talked about royalties is being set on the whole via
Yeah.
these proceedings, but the way that this plays out between the performance and mechanical right, that varies service to service. Does it make sense to kind of get into the performance side of this?
In a minute, as you were talking, I started to realize it might make sense to explain how this is all set and go through a slide about the phono proceedings, and then come back into each section. But first, we keep talking about Spotify. I'll say Spotify matters in the conversation because of its scale. It's the largest paid streaming service, and most industry estimates place its share of global streaming subscribers in the 30% range. Did you say 39 earlier? Is it about 30?
I think in the U.S. maybe a little higher than that, but anyways.
So globally, okay, in the 30% range is what I've read. And because of that footprint, even a relatively modest change in how Spotify structures or classifies its subscriptions creates this ripple effect through publishing models by extension, and it then affects catalog valuation. So the reason Spotify sits at the center of this discussion is not just what it did, but the scale in which it operates, and the signaling effect that creates across the ecosystem. Let me dive right in real quick and explain how these rates are set, Jake, and then let's go back, because I think we keep referencing it and we're confusing. I want to make sure it's clear to people what we're talking about these the Copyright Royalty Board and the phono records proceedings.
Okay.
So Aaron's going to share a slide. Tell me when you can see it.
Yep.
I can see it. All right. So I want to quickly level set how the CRB and the phono process works, because this is really the backdrop of what Jake and I are talking about and why the bundling conversation matters so much right now at this specific time. So at a high level, phono records proceedings are the formal rate setting process that determines US mechanical streaming rates. So they typically run in 5-year cycles, and each round sets the framework that governs publishing economics for the next period. So these proceedings are where the economic rules of the road for streaming mechanicals are written, and what we have to follow and what we can expect for our creators. And so if you look across this timeline, each phono round has progressively shaped the modern streaming model. You know, Phono 3 brought meaningful increases for us, but litigation to make it happen. Phono 4 set the current framework that we're being paid under as an industry today. And that's where the bundling came in. And the concerns on how we're being paid today. And those rates run through the end of 2027. So Phono 5 is underway now, and it's going to set the rates for 2028 to 2032. And this is important because many of the bundling questions we're discussing today are expected to be addressed in this upcoming proceeding. So the next set of rules are being shaped right now. And many of the stakeholders expect the bundle treatment and allocation mechanics to be heavily debated in Phono 5. You know, Phono 4 defines today. Phono 5 is what the market is trying to handicap or project as they set valuations today for the future. But you can, you know, if they're valuing your catalog or your artist's catalog or your writer's catalog, they're handicapping in there that it may not go as they expect. You know, Jake, from the buyer side, how much of Phono 5 uncertainty do you think is already priced into today's multiples versus still being an open question?
Yeah, that is a tough one. I would say we don't like to think of catalog values in multiple terms, let's say,
Fair
but
enough.
nonetheless, everybody loves the shorthand of thinking about multiples in terms of the value of their catalog. So I think, put simply, if royalties have been impacted negatively by bundling, and if multiples have been stable, all things equal, that does, result in, a reduction in value today.
Yeah, and even with the uncertainty, if we've already seen an impact in the royalty rate and the royalties being collected right now, a buyer's looking at that current payout
Yep.
and forecasting what they think the catalog is worth and what they're willing to pay for it based on that. And as Phono 5 defines what it really will be in the coming 5 years or 4 years, there's a, what is the end result? Best case, we'll get clearer guardrails around the bundle treatment, improve visibility into allocation and relative stability for our mechanical economics. Middle case, bundling remains permitted, but with some clarification or adjustment, and the market continues to model publishing income with, added complexity. And in worst case, broad flexibility for the DSPs stays in place, mechanical pressures become more structural for certain catalogs, and buyers widen the discount assumptions with exposure expecting higher cuts. The outcome will likely land somewhere in the middle, but the market's already modeling the range of possibilities, as we can see, because we're seeing that they're currently, yeah, it's in the statements that we're seeing right now. So you wanted to talk about briefly, and then I transitioned to this, some of the other platforms, Jake. Do you want to dive back into that, or mechanical and performance?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to talk about the way that royalties are divided between performance and mechanical, and that'll help to kind of address how bundling, has been felt elsewhere, might be felt elsewhere. Um, So again, with the chart that had just been outlined, these proceedings, they set the rate paid for mechanical, but they also set the total royalty level to be paid.
Mhm.
The way that royalties are paid, essentially, what's calculated is what's referred to as the all-in pool, the performance and mechanical royalty that's owed, and then uh, the mechanical piece is arrived at when the all-in pool is calculated. Again, I think that we can just think of that for now as a percentage of revenue, 15.1% of revenue that determines the total pool. But then the performance royalty piece, it's important to remember that performance royalties, those are determined by agreements between the performance rights organizations and the DSPs. So these are agreements that ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, etc. These are agreements that they have with the DSPs. Those agreements, those agreements can take different forms. They can run for different periods of time, and oftentimes, if bundling impacts mechanical, it will likely impact performance, but it's not necessarily the case that the two income sources will be materially impacted in the same way. Again, really because the way that the performance piece is paid, those are coming from separate agreements. So it's just important to remember that. Because depending on the underlying agreement that the PROs have with the DSPs, that all-in pool minus performance, you're backing it, you're left with the mechanical share of income. So Alex, I don't know if that sounds a little too abstract. Maybe it's worth
Yeah, no, I, I know some of this is going to get overly technical. At a high level, we tried to present that, look, royalty rates are being impacted. So royalties are being underpaid from our perspective, and that creates the value of your catalog. That's one way to look at it, right? As a very simplistic.
mhm.
But now let's take it to catalog by catalog consideration. So one of the biggest things as a manager and a catalog owner, a creator needs to understand is that that bundling risk isn't evenly distributed,
Yeah.
right? So platform concentration really matters. And I'd love your help in explaining.
Okay.
We often hear the term over indexing, right? Comes up. So we hear that word thrown out. What does over indexing mean in real underwriting terms? And when does it start to matter?
Okay. Um, So I'll provide Amazon as a good example that we can compare and contrast with Spotify. So late 2024, Amazon also introduced audiobook bundles to their individual plans. Um, the long and short of Amazon's introduction of bundling was that percentage decrease wasn't as steep as what we saw on the Spotify side. Really, the reason it wasn't as steep is because Amazon relative to Spotify, many of their other service offerings are really popular, and that kind of shields the bundled offerings from having more of an impact. So these are offerings like the single device plans and things like that, Amazon Echoes that have music subscription plans. So I just wanted to mention that so that we can think of so we can compare and contrast Amazon and Spotify. If we say Amazon was something like a 10% decrease, Spotify something much steeper, 30 to 35% decrease. So not all catalogs will feel um, that royalty decrease in the same way. It depends really the primary consideration for the impact that bundling has on royalties is the extent to which the income is concentrated on either DSP or if most of the income is coming through from other DSPs um, that have yet to be impacted, um, or where the bundling impact isn't necessarily material. Um, so So for instance, when we use terms like over-indexing, that really refers to, does any given catalog derive more of its income from Spotify than the average catalog, or than what is implied by Spotify's market share? So if we're saying Spotify's market share is something like 30 to 40%, that is what equates to something like a 35% decrease. Well, if a catalog only derives something like 15-20% of its income from Spotify, that impact won't be felt as steeply as if the catalog, let's say, derived 60-70% of its income from Spotify. There we would say, well, that catalog is over-indexed towards Spotify. It's going to feel the outsized impact um, of bundling. There are variations genre by genre in terms of what we typically see. So we usually think of a genre like hip hop as being over-indexed on Apple Music, a genre like country being over-indexed on Amazon, a genre like pop being over-indexed on Spotify. So not all genres are consumed in the same way or at the same level across these various DSPs. So that plays a role in terms of the magnitude of the impact that's felt.
So listen, from a manager, if you want to identify the exposure that you have, you can look at, the percentage of income from the various DSPs. Is it heavily weighted to Spotify or Amazon or somewhere else? Mechanical versus performance mix, US versus international weighting, subscription versus ad-supported exposure. All these things come into the mix. The practical reality is, until there's more clarity, many buyers are going to protect their downside in their models, and that can translate into more conservative assumptions for catalogs that appear to be more exposed into an area that may have uncertainty around it. So the transactions are still getting done, but this is an environment where sellers need to be very clear-eyed about the uncertainty that is being priced into the value of their catalog. And that's where alternative options, such as catalog value financing, where we provide financing against the value percentage, 50% of the value of a catalog without selling it outright, or royalty financing. So until there's clear rules, buyers are going to underwrite defensively, and that can show up in the prices we see today. For managers, the takeaway is that mechanical pressure is showing up first, but there's other pressures coming as well. In terms of overall catalog valuation, let's shift to valuations, because this is where everybody's focused right now. We are still seeing strong assets trade and plenty of capital in the market, but at the same time, this bundling has introduced a new layer of uncertainty around publishing cash flows. Jake, can you start off here from the valuation side? What do you guys see in the market today? Are buyers changing how they are underwriting catalogs that may have exposures? Are there questions changing?
Yeah, so the question that's primarily being asked, apart from just one centered around future rate proceedings, is, well, what can and what is being done today to help and alleviate some of this lost royalty income that we've been referring to? I mean, some of these numbers that I've been throwing out, I'm sure that for all the attendees on the webinar, they're a little frightening, right? These substantial declines in your U.S. mechanical royalty income. And so the attention is shifted towards, to what extent have developments helped to offset these declines? There have been some of those things. Some of this is still being worked through. Some of it's yet to be felt in royalty terms. But really what I'm alluding to are some direct deals that have been done in the market via the publishers that are operative and their DSP counterparts, and to what extent have direct deals and those sorts of things, what impact, what role do those play within the broader bundling issue? So that's a question that folks are turning to, is what can be done today really to try and alleviate this issue, and what does that look like?
So listen, for considering a sale as a creator in this environment, the key is to deliberate, what is the impact, and be well informed. Understand that there's alternative financing to cash flow. The moment, whether you should hold on to your copyrights longer, and look at alternatives. The market is still working through these changes. Values are holding current based on current earnings, but those earnings are under a microscope of what they may do in the future, and they're currently depressed to some degree. So you got to know your platform risk, understand where the revenue is actually coming from. Platform concentration, especially on the publishing side, is definitely a key diligence item. Understand timing risk. With Phono 5 underway and bundling still being debated, there's markets pricing in uncertainty. Timing can matter more than it did a few years ago if you have a catalog and what its value is. And certainly compare sale versus financing. Liquidity doesn't always require a permanent sale. In some cases, like with Sound Royalties, financing can provide flexibility while the market works through these changes. Jake, as you guys are advising clients in real time, does the framework line up with what you are telling managers and rights holders today, or is there anything you would emphasize differently of what they should be aware of when they're looking at the value of their catalog and if they should sell?
Yeah. Well, I, I suppose that you're totally right that these are all of these questions that we've been discussing. The open-endedness to an extent of this issue. This is really the framework that we speak to day in and day out as we talk about what we're seeing in terms of strength of cash flow, things that are impacting cash flow, et cetera, et cetera. Now as a valuation provider, um, we are really we're really just honed in on all of the mechanics that impact royalties, how to measure those things, how to think about upside, downside case scenarios. Um, where we don't necessarily play a role, let's say, is advising clients as to um, what we would encourage them to do. We've typically found we're more responding to that. Maybe they have a need, let's say, for more immediate estate planning, or something like that. So we're a little more hands off in that regards, more just expert on cash flow, let's say.
Got it. And I know when really truly looking at the value of a catalog, it's not common practice. It's common practice, but not right to just look at the multiple.
Yeah.
But easier to explain that way, right?
Yep.
And so we know if royalties are down, you have a calculation of what a catalog's worth. Are the multiples also down even without, so royalties are down, and are they being further depressed? In essence, would you see multiples be lower in that regard
Yeah.
because of what's happening?
Yeah. So this is I'm gonna throw probably too much complexity into the mix here because um, it's nice to hone in on particular issues, kind of measure their impact, get a sense as to how the royalties fluctuate, whether it's something like bundling or something like a price hike being effectuated. And so if you kind of take the panoply of things happening in the world, bundling, price increases, ex-US growth, the expansion of new licensing opportunities for publishing, whether that's connected fitness or even AI is kind of an open question around that future licensing value. And so you kind of take the let's say the upside pressure, the downside pressure. All of this, in our view, is kind of netted out to a net no change in multiples, let's say, over the last couple of years.
Okay. I was just in Germany and I was speaking to a group of publishers there, and I was talking about how this Spotify change in bundling directly impacted the US market and our, CRB process. And I asked if they expected things to impact them as well, and they said it already had, which surprised me. I was like, well, how? And they said that they saw it when Spotify increased the rates, their royalties didn't go up by that same percentage that the rates went up. And so somewhere in the calculation, they are being paid less. Have you seen anything about this? It was news to me, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, so this is becoming a worldwide issue.
Um, the impact of bundling in the U.S. outside of the U.S.
Yeah, the impact of using that or the allocation of royalties to music. So as Spotify raised its rates overseas, the publishers are saying if it was a 20% bump in the subscription price, we didn't see a 20% bump in royalties or money allocated to music.
Yeah, the way that it flows through the infrastructure can be a little challenging to follow. Sometimes there are um, not just the DSPs, but all music users might be afforded some standard deductions. Um, and so, it could be that alongside some price increases, maybe again, it's really all about what's making its way into the licensable bucket. Um, and alongside a price increase, were there some additional considerations for, um, some standard deductions or something like that? It's a possibility, but generally we have found that price increases have had maybe not necessarily one to one, but they have been positive for downstream royalties.
Got it. Any closing remarks? Any thoughts as I
Uh,
close this off?
yeah, I suppose my closing comments are probably, this is a very it's a very relevant issue. It's all about the next proceeding and the extent to which this loophole can be closed. Uh, I want to maybe alleviate uh, any listeners of our conversation that are perturbed by the magnitude of this impact on royalties. That might maybe a question in the back of their mind is to what extent have these bundled offerings been popular with consumers? Um, and when we've looked at the data, we've seen essentially no change in consumption, even though um, the service offering, changed overnight. It's not as if people started to listen to much less music. So there's just this mismatch right now between the way in which music is consumed at this constant rate on the DSPs and what makes its way into the licensable bucket. Um, the stage is set for this to really be the issue in the next proceeding, and so all eyes are really on that.
Yeah, and that's all unfolding right now in 26 and 27 for rates that will impact, and we'll see for 28. So it's happening right now. You know, the things we talked about today, it's a complex subject because there's so many layers to it and so many different ways that it can impact. But the takeaway is simple. Bundling is adding complexity to how certain publishing revenues are modeled, and buyers are underwriting more carefully because uncertainty exists. So strong assets are still trading, but this is a moment as a manager to really know your catalog, understand the platform mix, and be thoughtful about timing if it's around a sale, because a sale is permanent, right? And there's other ways to access liquidity. The good news for creators, you've got more options for your creators than you ever had before. So liquidity does not mean giving up ownership. It now means that there's options, and flexibility can be something to consider while the landscape continues to evolve. Jake, listen, I appreciate your insights. I'm sure people will reach out directly for their specific catalogs and what they may need and to understand because it really is catalog by catalog specific. I know for the sound royalties team, you know, our royalty specialists are happy to talk to people, reach out to us via our website, via our phone, which is on the website, soundroyalties.com. And we're happy to talk to you whether there's an immediate need for an advance or just understanding what is available to me. So Sharon, thank you for having us. I hope we were able to shed some light on a very complex subject.
I mean, it's deeply concerning. And, you know, knowing that it's taking place worldwide across all platforms at this time is worrying. And your conversation with the folks in Germany is obviously, you know, it's not limited. There is like nowhere to hide from this, no matter where you are. And knowing that options like sound royalties, where you don't have to make that sell at this time, but be able to give yourself some stability is great to be aware of. I guess we have a few questions. I quickly want to go through them here. I think you touched on this a little bit, Jake. The question of, are you seeing this affecting the multiples? I know, you know, that's a big question, but what are you seeing on that subject?
Yeah. So again, it's a tough one just because anything looking at anything in isolation, um, you know, helps to understand the issue, you know, best. But when we're looking at a catalog, we're looking at all sorts of income, U.S., ex-U.S., multiple rights, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is an impactful issue. Um, and you know, there's net positives, net negatives developing in the market. But ultimately, what we're seeing more or less stability in multiples when we take into account all considerations.
I've also got somebody asking, has the bundling issue been addressed by direct negotiations with the majors? But I guess it could be majors or indies, both are represented.
Yeah.
Is this something that is negotiable? I mean, the rates are negotiated. How is it that they can even do this without a negotiation?
Yeah, so there have been a number of direct deals struck in the market. It's again, it's a little things get a little complex because they're not necessarily directly comparable to uh, the governing rate structure. Um, it these agreements include mechanical rights, but they're not limited to mechanical rights. It's our understanding that they do go a long way towards looking to solve this issue.
Thank you very much.
And on the master sound recording side, you know, those rates are negotiated.
That's right.
On the publishing side, there's the attempt to negotiate, and if the sides can't come to an agreement, we have this process, which at times the industry has been able to come to an agreement with the DSPs. But I think many believe the money line is that this one will have to be litigated because there's a very hard line from the music industry's perspective about the impact of this bundling and that it's bad.
And it does impact, as you say, this isn't limited to publishing. This is both sides. This is mechanicals and performance. So presuming this will also have an impact on the MLC, correct?
Yes, the MLC is in the center of this, and that's on the publishing side. The mechanicals and performance on the publishing side are being impacted.
Well, we will see how this plays out. Maybe we should maybe we should revisit this once the hearing's been heard, which I gather is there's 3 judges essentially that determine this, correct?
In the end, if it goes to that and an agreement can't be made, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Really appreciate you being here and bringing your wisdom and knowledge to this subject and educating us all further. Obviously, we're going to have to keep watching the news and staying informed. We certainly endeavor to do that as much as we can. But we really appreciate you both taking the time to be here with us today. So
So
thank you. And please, reach out to us, or certainly if you want to stay informed, follow our newsletters. We try to be as informed as possible. But thanks to everybody who came here as well. Thanks to all the attendees, and really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day, Alex and Jake, but everybody else for showing up. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And hopefully, if you're in a snowy climb like I am, you're dealing with the snow as much as you can. So thank you. We appreciate you all. Take
Thanks,
care.
Sharon.
thanks. Take care.